On the very day two young people became engaged, the village held a special dance in their honor, but as they joyfully danced, a man stood at the back, visibly furious. Even when the village doctor, McLean, urged him to calm down, the man continued drinking whiskey and then stormed out of the crowd in anger. As evening approached, the dance by the roadside was still going on. Meanwhile, the angry man seized the moment when the fiancé was absent and took Kirsty's hand to dance. Though they danced without real purpose, he took the opportunity to constantly insult her fiancé with venom. It was obvious he admired the girl before him, leaving Kirsty feeling conflicted. Just as the fiancé returned, tension quickly arose. The man knocked Kirsty's fiancé to the ground, but Mado, the fiancé, did not retaliate after all. It was their engagement day. Moreover, the other man had drunk too much. Losing control was somewhat understandable. It was Mado's calm maturity that made Kirsty willing to marry him. Meanwhile, Kirsty felt a sudden urge to pee. She briefly excused herself from her fiancé and headed to a nearby hillside to relieve herself. As she gazed out at the sea, she tried to relax, when suddenly she sensed movement nearby. Before she could react, someone grabbed her mouth from behind. There was no warning at all. Struck on the head, Kirsty tried to fight back, but she was too weak, and the scumbag behind her violated her innocence. After some time passed, her fiancé, worried she hadn't returned, came searching anxiously by the shore. Then he discovered his girlfriend, severely injured in the head. But when Mado asked what had happened, Kirsty said she had fallen accidentally, not revealing her assault. And Mado didn't press further. He simply picked her up and hurried back to the village. Seeing her injuries were serious, they rushed to knock on McLean's door in the middle of the night. After settling Kirsty into bed, the doctor examined her and asked Mado what had happened. He, too, believed her fall was the cause given the darkness. McLean told him not to worry too much and to go home to inform Kirsty's family, who would come fetch her in the morning. For tonight, Kirsty would stay to receive care. Both families agreed, and Mado left the doctor's home.
I remember running around a hillock. Fell and banged my head on a rock.
Right now, come on, never mind. You try and get some rest.
Early the next morning, the anxious fiancé returned to the doctor's house. Kirsty had yet to wake, though she seemed to have overcome the night's trauma. After the doctor updated her condition, Mado wanted to take her home, but knowing he would soon enlist and head to the front lines, Kirsty asked him to stay. Just then, Kirsty's mother and sister Annie arrived and took Kirsty with them for the time being. Once home, Kirsty saw her injured reflection in the mirror, and memories of the previous night's horror resurfaced. Her blood-stained clothes made her instantly realize she had lost her virginity and that her life was forever ruined. Meanwhile, the village's young men began leaving for the front lines in France, and Mado, as the eldest son, said goodbye to his mother and younger brother before departing. Kirsty came to see him off and he gave her a book, a token of their love. A bittersweet farewell filled their hearts, uncertain if they would ever meet again. Inside the book was all Mado's savings, and his uncle's address in America. They dreamed of going to the US together, but hoped first that Mado would return safely to fulfill their vows. Kirsty placed the necklace her father had given her before he died around Mado's neck, praying for his safety. When Mado leaned in to kiss her goodbye, Kirsty deliberately turned away, still tormented by her assault and unable to meet his sincere gaze. After the young men left the village, life seemed to settle back into routine, but Kirsty was haunted by nightmares. The night's tragedy replayed in her mind like a curse. Her injuries even caught the attention of the local constable, who visited their home. When questioned, Kirsty insisted she had merely fallen, not been attacked, and the constable dropped the matter. But a month later, to her shock, Kirsty realized she'd missed her period well past when she should have had it. Fear gripped her. What if the assault had left her pregnant? While working on the farm, she pushed herself to the limit, desperate to hide her growing worries. Even her mother noticed her changed demeanor post-injury. The only moment of joy came when she received a letter from Mado. It overflowed with love, longing, and his blessings for her. Inside the envelope was a photograph taken before he left for the French front, a keepsake meant to comfort Kirsty. But as time passed, things took an unforeseeable turn. Kirsty tried to write back, but suddenly vomited in the street. Fortunately, Nobody saw this was a closed, conservative village where an out-of-wedlock pregnancy would spell disgrace. Despite her efforts to mask her discomfort, an elderly woman at the post office saw something off. Back home, Kirsty broke and vomited into a basin. Annie came to check on her but was met with impatience. Kirsty didn't want anyone to know, not even if she were to be married. But with her belly growing, secrecy was no longer possible. To disguise her pregnancy, she wrapped her swelling stomach tightly in white cloth. Though this hid it from village eyes, it endangered her unborn child. She hadn't married, and the pregnancy was a result of violation. If villagers discovered it, she would be shamed and abandoned. Then an unexpected message arrived from the front lines, a letter from her fiancé in France. Kirsty walked to the sea, loosened her binding for comfort, and read his words of longing in the horrors of battle. Muddo wrote how each bullet that flew past his ear made him yearn for the happy times with her. The terror of death lurking at every moment kept him alive through longing for home and family. But seeing so many comrades fall wore down even his resolve. Kirsty wept as she read his letter, filled with dread. Just then, Annie found her and noticed the white band on her belly. Under repeated questioning, Kirsty finally confessed, though asked Annie to keep it from their mother. Annie understood Kirsty was engaged, and the child had to be Muddo's, but much was still hidden. As they headed home, they ran into Annie's boyfriend, a soldier returning from war, and Muddo's comrade, but he'd lost an arm. When Kirsty asked what happened to Muddo, the man, unable to contain his grief, delivered the devastating news. Muddo may have died in battle. He pulled out the necklace Kirsty had given Muddo and handed it over, proof she'd hoped would arrive upon Muddo's safe return. All hope shattered in that instant. Back at home, Kirsty cried uncontrollably, her dreams of going to America and building a life with Muddo forever lost. Her mother, holding her, began to suspect from her swollen belly that something more had happened. That night, her mother subtly questioned Annie about the pregnancy. Annie wanted to protect her sister, but eventually, the truth came out. Yet they didn't know the baby wasn't Muddo's. The next morning, their mother decided it was time to act. She woke Kirsty, determined to take her to England to give birth far from the village's strict religious scrutiny. She even blamed Muddo for forcing Kirsty, but Kirsty vehemently denied it. She didn't want her mother to doubt Muddo's character. Tormented, Kirsty revealed the baby wasn't Muddo's and disclosed the assault, causing her mother to sob in sorrow. The situation was far worse than they thought. Fortunately, only McLean had treated Kirsty that night, otherwise, the family's reputation would be ruined. As they planned, Kirsty's water broke 2 months early. Her mother sprang into action, having Annie prepare for an at-home delivery. Unexpectedly, the village chief knocked on their door. Mother steeled herself, sent Annie in to calm Kirsty, and went to meet him. Everything had to remain composed if word got out. The scandal would spread through the entire town. The chief had come to comfort them. Knowing Muddo had fallen in battle, he brought a Bible to say a prayer for the family and fallen fiancé. The mother quickly lied that the baby was sleeping and promised a proper memorial later, then thanked the chief and sent him away. Returning, she found Kirsty in labor. They needed heat, water, and calm. With agonizing pain, Kirsty gave birth to a healthy baby boy, but when she reached for him, her mother refused to let her hold him. Eventually, her tears convinced her mother to let her cradle him briefly. Kirsty desperately wanted to keep her son, regardless of sin or doctrine, but devastated by societal judgment, her mother snatched the baby away. That night by the fire, the mother and Annie spoke of how to handle the situation. Looking at the sleeping child, she felt a pang of maternal remorse, yet reputation ruled. Unseen by them, Kirsty overheard every word, her pain deepening. Late at night, she quietly dressed, tiptoed past her mother and Annie, lifted her baby from his cradle, and fled. With the child in her arms and a hand lantern in tow, she made for a sea cliff, sobbing in despair. She loved the baby fiercely, but couldn't bear the shame of the village or being controlled by her mother. Believing death might free both of them, she prepared to jump from the cliff, a final act of defiance and maternal love. Just then, Annie found her, panicked. Annie stopped her from jumping, only to learn the baby had died. Heartbroken by the loss, they clung together, Kirsty saying she'd lost the only reason to live. Their mother arrived at the cliff in time. She couldn't bear to lose her daughter. As Kirsty began sinking, she remembered her father teaching her to swim and survive by the sea. That memory ignited a survival instinct. She began kicking upward. Annie and their mother reached down and rescued her amid the swirling waves. By dawn, an old man walking the shoreline saw a bundle washed ashore, a baby, abandoned. He investigated. Stunned, nothing like this had ever happened here. On the other side, the family had not yet recovered from what had happened the night before. Especially fearing that the baby might be discovered, the mother clutched her Bible, confessing her sins to Annie, but what they didn't expect was that the constable had already begun taking action. He first knocked on McLean's door. As McLean was the one villagers typically turned to when a baby was born, the constable explained the situation to him, narrowing his suspicions down to Kirsty. There weren't many young women in the village to begin with, and he had previously investigated Kirsty's injury at her home, hoping to find out if the doctor had noticed anything unusual while treating her that night. At first, McLean simply recounted what had happened that evening, but when Kirsty's fiancé was mentioned, it only deepened the already suspicious constable's belief that the abandoned baby must be Kirsty's, so he brought McLean with him directly to the girl's home, hoping the doctor could confirm whether Kirsty's body showed any signs of having given birth. To prove her daughter's innocence, the mother had no choice but to comply with the constable's request. At that moment, Kirsty was still trapped in her pain and unable to pull herself out of it. It wasn't until the doctor mentioned that a baby had been found that Kirsty began to grow wary. After the mother explained some of the circumstances to the doctor, he began the routine examination, but then he said something rather strange. He stated that he needed to examine Kirsty, but regardless of what he found, he would protect her no matter what. Those seemingly comforting words, however, made the girl suddenly realize something. With her mother's help, the doctor began examining her body to confirm if there were any signs of having recently given birth. But just as the exam concluded, McLean offered another gentle reassurance. "Trust me, I'll help you." Why would he go to such lengths to protect Kirsty, when they weren't even related? Was it purely out of sympathy, or was there something more to the story? Immediately afterward, McLean reported to the constable, stating that Kirsty indeed hadn't given birth and requested the interrogation be dropped. It seemed the matter should have ended there, but the constable remained suspicious. His instincts were sharp. He noticed the entire family had remained too calm, almost as if they were waiting for the inspection. Despite the doctor's attempts to cover things up and convince him otherwise, the constable sensed something wasn't right. He even considered bringing in an outside physician for a second examination. That same evening, in the village church, some locals gathered to mourn the fallen soldier. McLean quietly approached Kirsty's mother, whispered a few words, and left the scene. Clearly, he had passed on some crucial information. What would the family do next? To confirm if the girl had given birth, the constable brought not one, but two more doctors to the house. In this conservative and closed-off village, it felt like a cruel joke being played on the girl's purity. The mother was visibly outraged. The constable had no response but, eager to resolve the matter quickly, agreed to allow only one doctor to conduct the exam. The other two were ordered not to enter. The mother brought out a basin of hot water. After the old doctor washed his hands, he began examining Kirsty, lying silently on the bed. Kirsty said nothing from beginning to end. Outside, her mother waited anxiously, terrified they might slip up. Soon the doctor finished his examination and exited the room, confirming without a doubt that the girl showed no signs of recent childbirth. After seeing the doctor off, Kirsty immediately jumped out of bed. It turned out the entire exam had been a ruse. Annie had pretended to be Kirsty. The deception had succeeded. With the truth now supposedly uncovered, there was no reason to continue the investigation. Still, the constable had his doubts, especially regarding the abandoned baby that had washed ashore. Another village doctor suggested the child might have come from a distant village, tossed into the sea and carried here by storm. He, too, believed the matter should end there, but lying in bed, Kirsty grew increasingly unsettled. Who was it that had harmed her that night? Suddenly, she recalled what McLean had said during the examination. Why had he been so certain she would be safe? Could he have known something in advance? After enduring endless pain, the loss of her child, and emotional breakdowns, Kirsty finally pieced together the truth. The man who harmed her that night was none other than the seemingly kind, well-respected McLean. After much internal struggle, she resolved to confront this man with the face of a beast and the mask of a saint. McLean greeted her with warmth, inviting her inside his home, but Kirsty remained at the doorway, trembling with anger, and calmly recounted all the trauma she had suffered, hoping to stir guilt within him. McLean appeared to realize what she was implying but tried to stay composed, maintaining his false kindness and attempting to dismiss her claims, suggesting perhaps she was unstable. Kirsty didn't scream or lash out. Instead, with her emotions boiling beneath the surface, she questioned him in a low, trembling voice. Her steady barrage of questions shattered McLean's facade, and shame washed over him like a tide. If the villagers found out, he would lose everything, but worse was the realization of the filth in his own soul. At last, he fell into complete despair. Meanwhile, the constable had intended to speak with Kirsty, but gunshots rang out in the distance. McLean, consumed by guilt, had taken his own life. Though filled with sorrow and rage, Kirsty left the scene, but the matter was far from over. The villagers were shocked by the girl's expression and the echo of that distant gunshot. Rushing into her home, Kirsty told her mother the truth that McLean had been the one who violated her. She remembered not just his words during the examination, but also the smell of whiskey on him, that same stench from that horrible night. Moments later, the constable knocked on their door again. He suspected McLean's death was connected to Kirsty, and confidently accused them of having faked the examination, with Annie standing in for her sister. Pressed hard by the constable, the mother could no longer bear the pressure and confessed everything. Everyone has a compassionate side, even in a closed and conservative village, and since Kirsty was the one who had suffered, the constable, upon learning the truth, chose not to press charges or make things harder for the family. Just like that, a year passed. Life in the village slowly returned to normal. Now Kirsty was preparing to leave Scotland for America, the land she and her fiancé had always dreamed of, hoping for a new beginning. Before her departure, her mother called her into the room. She was proud of Kirsty's strength and independence, but also deeply ashamed of how she had acted in the past. Bound by tradition and pressure from society, she had sacrificed her daughter's well-being to protect the family's reputation, even trying to send the child away. Now, unable to suppress her guilt over letting her daughter suffer alone, she wept. But Kirsty never blamed her, not once, because she believed her mother had always loved her. They embraced tightly, reconciling with heartfelt forgiveness. Now all that remained were blessings and hope for the future. As Kirsty prepared to board the ship, the entire village came to say goodbye. Everyone showed kindness, including the once suspicious constable. On this small, religious island, even those with strong convictions could not erase the warmth of community ties. From the bottom of their hearts, they all wished this girl well in the new world. The book Muddo once gave her still held his uncle's address in America, her first destination. Soon, she arrived in New York, the city she had long dreamed of, and settled in her fiancé's uncle's home. Then one day, someone knocked on the door, suitcase in hand. To her shock, it was Muddo, her fiancé. He hadn't died in battle after all. He had been wounded and taken prisoner, spending the rest of the war in an enemy camp until World War I officially ended. Kirsty couldn't believe her eyes. All the pain and suffering she had endured at that moment, it had all been worth it. I'm a movie enthusiast. Please subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you next time.